Primetime Fantasy Football is brought to you by Next Level Radio. Head over to nextlevelradioonline.com for past episodes of Primetime Fantasy Football and the Showcast, plus celebrity guest spotlights. Now, on to this week's Primetime Fantasy Football.
People I never thought about associating with. I don't know what it is. Talk to me. Check it out. 85 acres with a mansion on my land. Full jacuzzis and my neighbors can't stand. The way I live is oh so fast. I got you ladies and prime time is all that.
Whoa, Dion. It's not that kind of prime time.
Yeah, man, it's Primetime Fantasy Football on Next Level Radio.
Well, alright. Yeah.
Welcome into another Primetime Fantasy Football. This time live again. We're back live, as last week we were just podcasted due to scheduling reasons. But Steve and I are back live, and we have a special guest co-host with us this week. Please give a warm Next Level and Primetime Fantasy Football welcome to Mr. Joe Webster.
Good to see you. Nice. Thanks for having me in the studio.
Yeah, we're high class here. Unfortunately, Steve is not in studio this week as he was last week. That's okay because he's still joining us via Skype this time, not Google Hangout because it was being a pain in the ass.
Yeah, well, technology, right?
All right, so this week we got for you. We're gonna quickly wrap up. You know, everybody played a preseason game this week, not just the Giants and the Bills like last week. But so we're just gonna give you a quick wrap up what we took away or what you should take away from this past week's performances. We're also gonna go down the NFC South focus, give you sleeper spotlights and over under as we usually do. Next week will be our final division with the NFC East. And then Steve and I are going to give you our wide receiver rankings. Joe's going to let us know how he feels about them, and he's also going to give us his rookie wide receiver rankings, as there are a ton of rookie. I keep wanting to say Wookiee wide receivers. I know I did it last week too.
You did say it last week.
So there are a ton of them. So we felt the need to rank them because we had nothing else to do. And
pretty bored.
Yeah, Joe had literally nothing to do this
week.
So
hopefully my boss is not listening right now.
This is what Joe does at work.
Yeah, pretty much right.
Ranks wide receivers. Excuse me. So if you still want to join our fantasy football league, there is room. I think we have 8 or 9 teams. I don't remember. Primetime at nextlevelradioonline.com. You just send us your name and your email address, which you'll be sending if you're emailing us anyway. And then we'll send you the invite. And you can sign up. Like I said, we're going to take the first 12 teams automatically make it. After that, I'm going to put the rest of the names in a hat and pick out 4 names, so we have 16. And then I think the week before we said we're going to pick names out of a hat for draft order, so that there's no shenanigans going on. But I think that's all we have to promote, right? I mean, you can tweet your questions. Yeah, you can tweet your questions to at NXT Level Radio, hashtag PTFF, or you can also send them to that primetime at nextlevelradioonline.com email. So let's get into the weekly wrap-up. Robot Bill was too lazy to give us any type of introduction for that this week. But we are going to call it a weekly wrap-up. So we're basically just going to run down stuff that we took away as much as you can for a preseason week 1. Try not to overreact too much to the games. It's just week 1. So first up, let's talk about the Jets and the Colts. Like the score matters, it really doesn't. Jets 13, Colts 10. What we took away, or what at least I took away, is Chris Ivory, struggling with a little bit of a rib injury, and I know they're going to be doing RBBC, which, if you're not familiar with acronyms, is running back by committee. He's expected to play in the second preseason game, so injury is kind of a concern for Chris Ivory this year, last year, and any year before that.
Yeah, I hear that. He has trouble staying on the field. I still think he's the best running back that the Jets have when he is on the field. But if he can't stay on the field, that obviously hurts his value and helps Chris Johnson's value, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think he definitely is the most talented running back, but throughout his career when he was in New Orleans and now here, he just seems to always have the injury bug. Something's always wrong. And as crazy is I don't think Chris Johnson is that great of a player anymore. I think his CJ2K days are over. He's intriguing because I think he's going to see a lot of touches because Ivory just cannot seem to stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, you could see his ADP start to slide, and I'm looking right now at least ESPN, and I know every website's a little bit different. CJ, and I think I've seen it lately as question mark K, CJ question mark K, because nobody knows if he's even maybe CJ less than 1K. Is currently going 59th as his ADP, and that's actually decreasing, which is what, the 6th, 7th round. So I mean, it is kind of intriguing because if Chris Ivory can't stay on the field, as much as Steve and I have both said, and I'm sure Joe agrees, Chris Johnson is not nearly what he used to be and not a great running back at all. But if you get him in the 7th round and Chris Ivory ends up getting hurt, he's going to get all the carries. Now, I don't know if you'd still even start him, but he could be a decent bye-week fill-in if he's getting all the carries.
You know, you've seen him be great at one point. So that's why he's intriguing. It was 6th, 7th round, 8th round. If you get him there, you know, you take a flyer on him and see what happens. But I wouldn't count on much. But that's why that Ivory injury is definitely intriguing.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to Ravens 23, 49ers 3, the Harbaugh Bowl, or the Harbaugh, I guess they're calling it. I took away from this one that Carlos Hyde performed very well. He was the starting tailback in that game on Thursday night. And, Frank Gore obviously was being rested. But with all the injuries that they have had in their backfield, the fact that Carlos Hyde is performing well shows me that, I don't think they're going to be afraid to go to him during the regular season. Yeah,
to me this looks, as you said in the last game, this looks like an RBBC. Is that right? The running back by committee thing?
That's the acronym.
Yeah, I don't think Frank Gore is going to be used like he was in the past. Like you said, at 31 years old, as long as Carlos Hyde continues to run hard and run well, I think you could definitely see him coming up and taking some carries away from Frank Gore for sure.
I agree with both of you 100%. However, I feel like we've made the same exact argument for 2 years now. That Frank Gore is getting up there in age. He's hitting that 30-year-old limit where running backs seem to have downhills. And he just keeps performing. Last year, I think he was a top 20 running back again. He may have even been down in like the 12, 13 range. So I do think Carlos Hyde is good. And I do think he is definitely going to take some carries away from Gore. But I would not count Gore out from still being a pretty fantasy-relevant running back this year.
Well, the only thing where, this to me is a little bit different is because I don't know that they really liked anybody as much as they like Carlos Hyde so far.
That's fair.
I mean, and I'll say that I'm not going to take credit for this because this is on Roto World where I read this. I guess they have Hyde in the shotgun, and he made apparently an impressive blitz pickup, which shows that they're willing to stick him back there in the shotgun and not just hand him off the ball. They're gonna, they're willing to let him pass block and stuff like that. So I mean, it shows they have confidence in him. Now I kind of agree, whereas I don't think he's going to take over for Frank Gore. I definitely think you'll see him take some carries. The team runs the ball an awful lot. I could see both of them having some fantasy relevance this year.
Yeah, I think so. And all it's going to take, though, is Carlos Hyde missing a couple blocks, as a rookie running back is going to do a couple times.
Right.
And I still think Frank Gore is obviously the guy you're going to want there. And I think Carlos Hyde is someone that I'm actually targeting late in drafts because Gore is getting up there in age and injury is a concern. But I think a lot of people are really counting Frank Gore out. And I'll be honest with you, I'm targeting him in my draft as well.
Yeah, if Frank Gore falls, if he falls back to that 6th, 7th round range, I would take him over Chris Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
And I would not reach for Carlos Hyde. But if he's there later, I'll take him over a guy like Terrence West, even, because Terrence West, I mean, talk about overreaction, but he did not have a good first game. But then it's just their offensive line is not that great for running the ball in general. And the 49ers can run the ball. So let's move on to the Redskins beating the Patriots 23-6 after practicing with them all week. Steve, what stuck out to you about this game?
I saw Kirk Cousins outplaying RG3. Well, first of all, I saw that there's no way the Redskins will ever beat the Patriots 23-6 in a game that matters. So that'll show you the score of the preseason. But Kirk Cousins did outplay RG3, which is, I mean, I've been saying this since we started, that it's a show-me year for RG3. It's not like Kirk Cousins is going to take RG3's job, but I just don't have a lot of confidence. We did the quarterback rankings last week, and I wasn't that high on him. I don't have a lot of confidence in RG3 this year. I know it's the first game. We're talking about not overreacting, but he's just not all that high on my list, and I'm not going to go out of my way to go get him. And so far, I've been proven right, which I always like.
Yeah, I mean, this is really a lot of pressure on RG3 this year, and it's early, and we'll talk about preseason maybe jitters or just not overreacting several times throughout this segment, like with Nick Foles, which we'll get to, but just monitor it. You keep an eye on him throughout the preseason. He could obviously improve. They're going to limit his rushing, which is a turnoff to me as far as when you're talking rushing fantasy quarterbacks, because I like rushing fantasy quarterbacks because rushing yards are 10 yards or 10 yards per point, whereas passing yards are only 25. So, anytime you're telling me you're going to limit his rushing yards and that's going to go down, that puts a lot of pressure on his arm and him to stay in the pocket, which I don't know that I can consider him pure pocket quarterback, and I know they're trying to do that with him.
He's got happy feet to me. I just don't see it in the pocket, but
he's looking to run first too often.
Yeah, I mean he might have and I know this changed after he tore his ACL. Speaking of Donovan McNabb, he kind of had that same early in his career. He had the happy feet syndrome. Now that, like I said, it changed after he tore his ACL, and RG3's already torn, I think, both of them, and it hasn't changed. So I don't know that it'll ever change.
Well, I think in order for him to be a top quarterback, he's got to run. I think that's where he had his most success as a rookie. So I think if you are high on him, and I'm not particularly high on him, I think I'm kind of in Steve's camp. Whereas I think he's too risky for me because of his injuries. But I think if you are drafting him and you think he can get back, you're hoping he's going to still run. Especially if you play in a 4-point per touchdown passing league, those rushing touchdowns and rushing yards are really going to help you out.
Yeah, we're going to have to, I know Steve and I did our quarterback rankings last week, which if you want to see them, you can go to nextlevelradioonline.com, but he might actually drop back on my quarterback rankings a little bit. We have to update those. But also from that game, obviously Gronkowski didn't play, so it's really nothing about that game in particular. But apparently it came out this week that he's 50-50 for week 1. Today, apparently Adam Schefter said there's still some optimism he's going to start. That is a huge red flag for me. When it comes to Gronk, everybody was really confident about him starting week 1 a few weeks ago when he wasn't on the PUP list. But now, anytime that you question, I have flashbacks, nightmare flashbacks to last year when they weren't sure. Is he going to play week 1? No, he's not going to play week 1. Is he going to play week 2? No, he's not going to. He comes back week 6 and then gets hurt a few weeks later. Like that to me is a big red flag, and I'm actually avoiding. Steve, are you on the road? Are you outside?
No, I think we just get cut in and out. That's the beauty of Skype.
So to me, Gronk is a little bit of a caution flag for me right now.
I heard Schefter on SportsCenter I was watching before we jumped on here, and he said that Gronk is essentially ruled out for the entire preseason. It's going to be tough to get him cleared to play any preseason action. Obviously, he's good enough to play right away on his natural ability, but you'd still like to see him get some kind of snaps in preseason just to feel a little better about taking Gronk whenever you decide to take Gronk in a draft.
I am not concerned about him missing preseason at all. I think the guy is an absolute monster on the field, and I'll tell you, even if you tell me right now he's going to miss the first 3, maybe even 4 games, I'll still put money on it that he's a top 3 tight end. I think he's that talented, and I think Brady will target him every chance he gets. Now, that being said, I don't know if I'm going to be the guy willing to take him in the 3rd round, where his ADP currently is. I believe it's in the 3rd round, even if it's in the 4th round. I don't know if I'm there yet, but sitting out the preseason does not scare me at all for Gronk.
Yeah, he's currently ADP is 34, and these are all off ESPN. So
yeah, I don't know if I'm that guy to take him at 34, but whoever is that guy, I think he'll be fine.
Well, that remains to be seen. I mean, the only thing that would scare me about that is when you're playing not to get hurt, you get hurt.
I don't think that's him. You've
It
seen,
has been him the past like 3 years.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good. I don't think he's playing. I don't think he plays safe. I think he plays all out at all times.
Yeah,
so I don't think he's going to play any differently. But you're right. He has been an injury risk every year, and maybe it's because of that style of play that puts him at more of a risk.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
All right, good.
All right, so let's go on to the Chiefs and the Bengals in a shootout. Chiefs 41, Bengals 39. Again, the scores don't matter. What I took away from this, or what I noticed from this, was that even though the depth chart said otherwise, Jeremy Hill played ahead of Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. And it looks like Ben Jarvis Green Ellis still could be on the roster bubble for the Bengals. So ignore the depth chart. They do like Jeremy Hill better than Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. I still don't think you need to worry if you're a Giovanni Bernard owner. Jeremy Hill's going to get some touches, but they, I think, are going to rely heavily on the run this year. And I think Gio Bernard is still going to get plenty of touches.
Yeah, this more speaks to me about Gio Bernard, where they're kind of fighting for the second spot, and Gio Bernard's in the front spot. So this kind of just solidifies, if anything, that Gio Bernard has a lot of worth going into the season, and he might even be due for some kind of breakout type year because they don't really know who's going to play behind him, and they don't really trust anybody behind him.
Yeah, and I can see a situation where both Bernard and Hill have some pretty big years just because of that injury to the wide receiver Marvin Jones is going to put him out the first few weeks. You don't know how healthy he's going to be when he comes back, and I think he was on a lot of people's sleepers list for a wide receiver. So I think when they are in passing situations, I think drawing a blank. Bernard, he caught a ton of passes last year, and I think Hill can catch the ball out of the backfield too. So it wouldn't surprise me to see both of them contributing early.
Yeah, and also they were talking about maybe Jeremy Hill taking away the goal line, the short yardage for Gio Bernard. But last year, apparently, Gio Bernard was taking away some goal line stuff for Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. And Gio Bernard's smaller. He's not micro, but I don't think you have to worry about Hill being too much of a touchdown hawk. It is going to affect him a little bit, but like you said, Bernard's going to be really involved in the passing game, so that's going to add value right there.
Absolutely.
And as Steve knows, I'm huge on Gio Bernard this year.
It's true.
Steve, why don't you tell us what stuck out to you about the Broncos beating the Seahawks 21-16?
Yeah, it's not easy to find news like for all these games that's fantasy relevant at least. Like I said, or like you said, it's the first preseason game. We try not to overreact, but the thing that stuck out, Demaryius Thomas only played 16 snaps. And in those 16 snaps, he got 5 catches and 52 yards. So I guess just to make this a point of conversation, because we know Demaryius Thomas is good, and we're going to rank wide receivers later and prove that Demaryius Thomas is good. Is there any scenario, is anybody ever taking Demaryius Thomas in front of Calvin Johnson? I throw it out to the panel.
Joe, I'll let you start out.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Now, that being said, could I see a situation at the end of the year where Demaryius Thomas is the number one receiver? Absolutely. But there's no way I'm taking him above Megatron. Calvin Johnson, to me, is hands down the number one receiver.
Yeah, I'm going to agree there, too. I just think it does obviously help you anytime you have Peyton Manning throwing you the football.
Doesn't hurt.
But Calvin Johnson has a pretty good quarterback throwing him the football as well, and Matthew Stafford. And they throw a lot.
They throw a ton.
And I think Peyton Manning likes to spread it out, and I think Stafford's going to target Calvin Johnson. So unless somebody gets injured, I'd still pick Calvin first before Demaryius Thomas. But like you said, I probably, I could see it being close come year's end. Steve, would you? Yeah. Are you saying?
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not doing that either. I'm taking Calvin Johnson first. I was just hoping to get some kind of controversial answer so we can.
Demaryius Thomas is the best running back and wide receiver in the league.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm taking him number one overall.
Put that on the internet.
All right, let's move on to the Chargers and Cowboys. Chargers 27, Cowboys 7. Steve, take it away.
Yeah, the Cowboys decided not to play Lance Dunbar, but it was because they want to save him for the regular season because they think that he's for a huge year. So we'll go into around horn mode with buy or sell, and again, so we don't just talk about it for what it's worth. Is anybody buying that they think they like Lance Dunbar as a healthy scratch because they want to save him because they think he's in for a huge year this year.
I think this speaks more to the fact that they think DeMarco Murray can't stay on the field for 16 games. But I do think you're going to see Dunbar get an increased role. I don't think they're, completely. They were talking about Dunbar having a big year last year too, weren't they? But he got injured.
Yeah, I believe that was the case.
Yeah, so I think they're just trying to prevent that. If I had to guess, I think they like him.
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody. I think Murray, if he can stay healthy, is going to be a top running back this year. But has he ever been able? I don't think he's ever had a season where he's played all 16 games.
I don't believe so.
So I think you're right. I think they are kind of saving him and just hoping that when Murray goes down, they have a guy who's also healthy.
Yeah, it's not an if but when situation.
Exactly.
Are you buying it, Steve?
I guess. I mean, I don't really know. The Cowboys seem to talk a lot like the Jets do, but I guess you could see it as a running back, again, another running back by committee type thing. That's part of what makes the fantasy running back so thin this year is that a lot of teams are going to the committee. Joe is right. The most games that DeMarco Murray's ever played was last year.
14.
And he only played 14 games. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he's never played a full year. So, I guess you got to have a backup plan, and you don't want your backup plan getting hurt like he did last year. So,
that was also
might as well save him. Yeah.
That was also the first season he had over 200 rushing attempts too.
Yeah. So
that shows you that. Yeah, that shows you that. I mean, maybe they don't know if he can get another 200. That's kind of interesting, man. I didn't realize he had 164 and 161 in his first 2 years. And they jumped up to 217 last year and got over 1,000 yards, and 9 touchdowns. But yeah, I'm not sure what to think about DeMarco Murray. I think he's being overdrafted a little bit, a little bit too high. But when he's healthy, he's going to put up points. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to do with him.
He's tough to me because I do think he could be a top 5 running back if he plays 16 games. I think that offense is going to be on the field a ton. I think he's going to have a chance to catch a lot of passes as well because they're going to be playing from behind because the Dallas defense may be worse than last year, which I don't even know if it's possible, but they may be worse. That being said, if you're talking about a late round 1 running back, maybe early round 2, depending on how your draft goes,
right,
you have to go in saying, I'm hoping I can get 14 games out of my running back.
Right.
Your first running back pick, maybe your second running back pick, and I don't feel comfortable doing that. If I'm picking a guy, I want to plan on him hopefully playing 16 games, which I know you can't plan injuries, but he's never proven that he can last in a full season, and I don't know if I'm willing to spend a 10th or 11th pick on a guy that you're hoping to get 14 games out of.
Yeah, I mean, let me look at all real quick, because I want to see who's getting drafted around
I guess Ball. My guess would be Ball.
DeMarco Murray. Zach Stacy. Ball is getting drafted before?
I think most places I've seen him up there pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, actually, no, Monte Ball has dropped a lot, at least
with the appendectomy.
Yeah, ESPN-wise. So I would rather have Monte Ball. Le'Veon Bell I'd rather have, actually. Just because he's, I think, I'm not letting LeGarrette Blount scare me there. But we can talk about that as the season gets closer. And Zach Stacy, running back-wise, is going after DeMarco Murray. And I like Zach Stacy this year, too. But again, I think Zach Stacy even had a little... Didn't he have a little bit of an injury last year at one point? I forget.
I don't remember. I had him in one of my leagues. I don't remember him having an injury. If he was, it wasn't significant.
Yeah, I forget. Maybe
going back to another guy you talked about, it's amazing. I'm looking at Fantasy Football Calculator, and you've got DeMarco Murray at 13, and you got Gio at 19.
Oh, I would take Gio all day.
DeMarco Murray, too. I'm looking at Yahoo.
Yeah, and it's, and I think... I'm not sure the reasoning behind that, to be honest with you. I don't know if people are afraid of Hill vulturing some of his carries, but I'd have a hard time taking... I think they're a lot closer than the ADP says.
Well, let me ask you both this. Who do you think will have a better year, Dunbar or Hill, as a backup?
I'd say Hill.
Hill? Steve?
I'd say Dunbar because of the instability of DeMarco Murray. I think Dunbar might get a bigger chance.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Steve and go Dunbar. I'm glad we brought you on, Joe. At least You know, you are picking all the wrong things.
Well,
so.
it's good to know. Somebody's got to be wrong.
Staying before we move on, speaking of that hard Cowboys defense, Phillip Rivers completed 4 of 4 passes, 61 yards, no touchdowns or interceptions against the Cowboys, apparently picking them apart pretty easily. Do you think that's more Phillip Rivers picking up where he left off last year, or the Dallas Cowboys defense taking a step down from where they were last year, or a little bit of both?
I was going to say both.
Okay.
I think it's both. I think Phillip Rivers is a really solid fantasy quarterback. I think he's somebody you can get late in your draft and be happy with. He's not going to, there's going to be some weeks where he gets you 10 or 11 or 12 points and not in the 20s. But I think that's a little bit of both. He's a solid quarterback, and the fact that I think you could have went 4 for 4 in that game against the Cowboys.
Yep, I hear that. I love Phillip Rivers, so I'm going to say that Phillip Rivers always looks good. But Dallas' defense stinks. They're really bad.
They are.
And as Eagles fans, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's real nice. And now that they're actually showing up and you get to watch them on TV, you might actually think about bumping up Foles and Griffin in your draft just because they play them twice in a year.
Exactly.
They're that bad.
I still don't bump up Eli Manning, though. And we'll get to that.
Nothing against that.
All right, so Falcons and Dolphins. Falcons 16, Dolphins 10. Devonta Freeman with 107 all-purpose yards, but still apparently operating as their number 4 running back. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I haven't seen the new episode of Hard Knocks yet, so I won't give away any spoilers. I don't see Freeman as the number 4 running back, though. By the time the season rolls around, if this hamstring thing lingers for Steven Jackson, I think he could be the number 1 running back as opposed to the number 4 running back. I'm into Devonta Freeman as a late type guy, a handcuff type guy, maybe even a late sleeper that you can get for good value.
Yep, I agree. I do think that it's probably just listed as he's the rookie, and the coaches want to probably just try to get him motivated. I think it's the same thing that's happening.
Do they really do that though?
They drafted in Tennessee. They've got Sean Green ahead of Bishop Sankey, and I'm not saying Bishop Sankey is going to be that rookie that breaks out like Doug Martin did 2 years ago, but I think everybody understands that Sankey's going to be the starting running back in Tennessee week 1, not Sean Green. So I think maybe they're trying to do this, give the veterans a chance to try to prove themselves, but I agree with you, Steve. I think at the beginning of this the season, he's going to be number 2 right behind Steven Jackson.
Yeah, I right now listed ahead of him is Quiz Rogers. Jack Quiz is his full name, but we just call him Quiz here on the show. And Anton Smith. And I don't think, obviously, he's got to be ahead of Smith come the season. And Quiz hasn't really shown anything. He's had chances the past couple of years, and he has shown that he can't be that every down back. So, yeah, I agree with you guys. I mean, I think Freeman, though listed at 4, he's going to be listed as 2 by the time the preseason comes to a close.
Yeah, the one concern they're having right now, and this is courtesy of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, his blocking in camp, Freeman's that is, has just been okay.
Okay.
So he hasn't had a great camp blocking, but as I think every rookie coming in struggles with that.
Yeah, Monte Ball last year.
Absolutely, that's the reason why he wasn't the starter at the beginning of the season. So I do think that's something he probably can pick up, but if he doesn't pick up, I think you're going to definitely see a lot more of Quiz Rogers.
Yeah. Could be RBBC.
Absolutely. Let me ask you guys something. Is it out of the question for Steven Jackson to be relevant again?
Yes.
Just 100% out of the question.
Yeah, I'm not touching him anywhere before the 8th round.
Steve, what do you think?
I'm not really all that into him either. I think he's proven that he's not durable more than he has, and I'm kind of over it as well. And hopefully, if I end up with him and he's obviously the best on the board, I might take him, but I won't be particularly excited if I do end up with him.
Yeah, if he's my starting running back, I'm not happy about that.
No, I don't think I am either. I think more, there's that big, and I'm not sure if you've talked about this in the previous podcast, but there's that big push right now for the 0 running back strategy for drafting.
Right.
So
take no running back in the first 3 rounds.
Right. Well, I've even heard 5 rounds. So you're getting your quarterback and you're getting your tight end. So then
screw that. I'm not taking my quarterback before a running back.
Well, I'm just saying. So I'm not saying I subscribe to that. But so if you're looking around 5, 6, 7, and even 8 to draft your first running backs, and maybe you have 1, but you're looking your 2 through 4 or 5, you're looking for one of them to hit. I think that their offensive line is improved, but I think I'm just trying to be nice because I want nothing to do with him as well.
All right, well, let's move on to the, because I know we're already about half hour into the show almost, although we did start a little bit late. Let's get on to who are we on? Bills and Panthers. Bills 20, Panthers 18, which is another odd score. Tavares King on the rise, Steve?
That's what I read on ESPN. That's what they told me. The only reason I mentioned this is because I think Carolina's still looking for a receiver to actually do something.
Do you listen to everything ESPN tells you?
No. Yes.
If you did that, Johnny Manziel's the next Joe Montana.
That's a good point. Joe Montana.
He'll also be former LeBron James.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. So I only said it because I think the Panthers are still looking for a receiver. Apparently, Benjamin has risen up, who I believe we'll talk about, obviously, because he's a rookie receiver later. So I believe Benjamin has shown something at least this week in practice, but the Panthers are kind of looking for something, so Tavares King could be it. Yeah,
I think I know that just came out the other day who's listed. I know was it Cotchery? Cotchery, Benjamin are listed as 1 and 2, with Benjamin being
and
one,
they have Avant.
Yeah, Avant's number 3.
Yeah, so I could see that. I could see him working his way into 3 wide receiver sets. I have no problem with that. I don't think Avant's anything special. Watching him here in Philadelphia for a few years. Jaguars $16.10. Gus Bradley backs Marquise Lee, but at the same time questioned him a little bit at another point.
Yeah, questioned his effort. I'm sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think Joe was on it. I think he questioned his effort at first and then kind of retracted his statements. So it's kind of a bit of a both worlds type of thing. Maybe Joe, you have a little bit more into the insight there.
Yeah, he was targeted 0 times in the game, but I think a lot of it, from some of the stuff I read from beat reporters down there in Jacksonville, was they're concerned about the injuries that they have to Robinson's and Cecil Shorts down there, so they didn't want to give him too many looks, too much work, and put him at risk of hurting himself as well. But then, like you said, Gus Bradley came out and questioned his effort. And as a rookie, maybe Gus Bradley's got that, he's that defensive-minded coach. Maybe that's his motivational way of trying to get, light a fire under his butt.
Yeah.
Because then he did come out and, like you said, backed him and supported him. I don't think we should look too much into that, questioning his effort just yet. I think I would want to see a couple more games with him in there with a full set of receiving core.
Right, yeah. And, I mean, who else do they really have to go to at this point?
No one. I mean, Cecil Shorts can be a pretty good receiver.
Yeah, if he's healthy. Yeah.
But he has to be healthy.
I agree. Moving on to the Eagles, losing to the Bears 28-34. Steve, what did you take away from the Eagles and Bears game? I know as Eagles fans, it was probably a little hard to watch if you watched it.
Yeah, it wasn't good. The first team wasn't good. A lot of people were really excited about Jordan Matthews because he's the next coming of Harold Carmichael in practice. And
I heard him compared to T.O.
He ended up with 3 drops in the game. So
yeah, I don't know if I'm going T.O. on him, though.
He's got the same number. That's about all I've seen so far.
Yeah. Chip Kelly came out and said that he thinks nerves were to blame just because it was his first game under lights. I think it's about time to get Jordan Matthews with the first team in practice so that he can sync up with Nick Foles because they have a lot of injury problems going on right now. But that's more because I live in Philadelphia and I have an opinion on the Eagles. As far as fantasy goes, I think Jordan Matthews will be just fine as a later pick and as a potential sleeper. And another rookie guy that we'll be talking about later, thanks to Joe. So without covering it too much,
I might avoid him a little bit this year just because I don't like I don't know how, I don't like him being in the slot, exclusively. That's the word I was looking for. I kind of wish they would, if they had him more working on the outside a little bit more often, I'd be a little more excited about it. But then again, they don't really have much going. Macklin might be hurt again with a hamstring issue, and Cooper's been, I don't think Riley Cooper's anything special, so he could be the number 1 guy there. I don't know.
I don't know about number 1. I'm really big on Macklin this year.
Well, not this year, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but maybe in the future. I think that the offense for Chip Kelly is just so dynamic. And I do agree that it's the first game. I don't look too much into it because every beat reporter, if you follow them on Twitter or read any of their stories, they've been raving about Jordan Matthews from day one.
Yeah.
So, a first preseason game where the entire offense looked pretty bad to begin with, I'm not worried too much about it. I think he's good. They're going to find ways to get him the ball because I do think he's a difference maker.
Yeah, I agree. Sticking with the Eagles, not much to really talk about on the Bears side because everybody looked pretty good. Nick Foles looked decent, but not great for the majority of training camp, and obviously picked off twice in that first preseason game. Are you two reading at all into that? Steve will start with you, I guess.
This falls under the overreaction after one game category. I guess, I don't know, he doesn't have any receivers to work with. Everybody's been hurt and they haven't been practicing, so I don't know what you really expect him to do when he's not working with anybody. So.
Yeah, I also don't think the Eagles are running their offense in the preseason. I don't think you saw them run it last year. I don't think you're going to see them run it this year. And I think once you see them run it, I guess they're probably going to try and get the ball out of his hands a lot quicker. He threw a couple really bad passes. But it's the first time they're hitting people all year, so I'm not going to read too much into that either.
Yeah, and this isn't an excuse for Nick Foles, but I went back and I watched I don't actually have tape or anything, but I just DVR'd it and I went back and watched.
Watch the tape.
And I watched the tape. I sound like Jaws. So I watched the tape, and both interceptions he threw, he wasn't stepping into his pass because he was getting a rush from the offensive line, giving up. Barbary did not have a good game at right tackle.
No.
And he's going to be the starting right tackle for the first 4 games.
Yeah.
That being said, Barbary had to come in for a Jason Peters injury last year and played very well.
Yeah.
I think Shady had 160 yards in Green Bay last year when they won that game. I know he broke 100, so it was up there. So no, I'm not reading too much into Nick Foles. I'm not making excuses for his poor passes. He still should have been able to, throw it away, scramble, take the sack, whatever. But I want to see a lot more before I'm willing to give up on Nick Foles.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Vikings and Raiders. Vikings 10, Raiders 6, and we'll try and move through these pretty quick. Matt Schaub didn't have a great game, right? I believe I didn't get to watch it, obviously.
Yeah, they only scored 6 points, but I mean, he's still the starter.
Yeah,
I guess I don't know.
They keep saying that Derek Carr. They keep sticking to that Derek Carr is gonna kind of ride the bench this year. So
yeah, we'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, you can say that now, but when you're 0-6, I don't see a reason not to put him in. I had no fantasy value there for me though, for either of them, either quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. It was tough to find fantasy stories for some of these games, like you said.
Saints 26, Rams 24. What we learned from this one is that there really is no number one back in New Orleans, just like there has not been the past several years. I mean, if you're going to take a chance on anybody, are you taking Pierre Thomas or are you taking Kyrie Robinson?
I'm going to go off the board and take Mark Ingram. I don't know why, just because.
Okay.
But I don't think I'm really going to go after any of these guys. To me, Mark Ingram is the actual, he's an actual running back. So I think that they would go to him more on the goal line and things like that. But at the same time, I think I'm going to avoid all 3 of them if I possibly can.
All right, Joe.
Yeah, I like Pierre Thomas. He's going to catch a lot of balls. Last year he led the league with 77 receptions as a running back. Where you're getting him, I think the reason I like him is what you're getting. You can plug him in as a flex player some weeks, and you know that you're going to get some points out of him as a flex player. Ingram is intriguing, though. He looked really good in that first preseason game. But again, I don't want to overreact to somebody also. We're not overreacting to Nick Foles looking bad. I don't want to overreact to Ingram looking good. But if I had to draft right now, I actually like where Pierre Thomas is going. I'd be fine having him on my team.
Yeah, in a PPR league, obviously, he has a lot more value because
he bumps up a lot.
Yeah, he doesn't have Sproles even taking away any more catches out of the backfield at this point. Let's go on to the Lions 13, the Browns 12. The first look at Johnny football this season at all in actual football action. And there were reports almost immediately after the game that Manziel moved ahead of Hoyer in the race for the number 1 quarterback for the Browns. I'm still taking. I would take a flyer still on Manziel because he is that rushing quarterback, and he's gonna make plays with his feet. But the only thing that scares me watching the highlights is he really. He committed to running the ball pretty quickly. He didn't go through progressions very much, so that scares me a little bit.
I think that's most rookie quarterbacks probably do that in their debut, but I see that happening all year. I'm one of I'm a Johnny football hater. Not personally. I want him to succeed because I think he's an interesting story. I think he is extremely talented. I just don't know if that style of play can last. I mean, look what happened to Robert Griffin III his rookie year. I mean, he had a great rookie year, but when he got hurt, he hasn't been the same guy since.
Forget it.
So I don't know but I do agree. I think he's going to have some relevancy because of his rushing yards.
Yeah, maybe just this year. I mean,
maybe, yeah.
He could be an issue going forward. But look, and I know I said this to Steve before, but look at what Tim Tebow did when he actually was a quarterback in the league. He even put up decent fantasy points because he ran
because of the run. I was going to say, I think it's an insult to compare quarterback-wise Manziel to Tebow because Manziel is.
They were both taken late in the first round.
I would say Manziel is a much better quarterback.
Throwing, yes.
Yes.
He can throw the football,
yeah.
Whereas Tim Tebow could not.
Right.
Steve,
and that's important in quarterback play.
It's somewhat important, yeah. Steve, what are you thinking about this Johnny Football Fever, as well as maybe one of his receivers that might have shown pretty well on the preseason opener?
Yeah, I think at this point we can pretty much move forward with. You guys said it all about Manziel. I think we can pretty much move forward that he's going to start week 1. No matter how hard Petten tries to hide it, Brian Hoyer is not going to start week 1, and Johnny Manziel will, so you can move forward. If you like Johnny Manziel, he will be a starter week 1. I don't know if you want to be a starter for your fantasy team week 1, but he could start in regular football week 1. I was more interested in Charles Johnson, like you said, one of his receivers. He's kind of an up-and-comer kind of guy, sleeper for me out of Grand Valley State, so nobody really knows who he is at all. But he's been impressive at least. And we know how much Adam doesn't like Miles Austin, and
hate him.
And Josh Gordon is not going to play because
he's at least not playing half the season. He probably won't play at all.
Yeah, so somebody has to play. We're kind of in the same boat with Cleveland that we are with Oakland. Yeah. Unfortunately for fans of those teams, but somebody has to catch the ball. So you might as well take a flyer on somebody. And the guy right now that I'm probably going to take a flyer on because I can get him way late, if not. Just pick him up on the waiver wire is Charles Johnson.
Yeah, I agree. 100%, by the way. Because, like you said, the only other guy they're going to throw to is Jordan Cameron. And you literally can't throw to him the entire game. So, Giants 20, Steelers 16. Steve pointed out that through 2 preseason games, Eli Manning has yet to attempt a pass traveling 10-plus yards in the air. And you're going to see a lot of that because they want him to get to that 70% completion percentage this season. So don't expect much out of him. Titans 20, Packers 16. We talked about Bishop Sankey a little bit earlier. He stood out to everybody.
That's what they.
Yeah, he's better than Sean Green. Go ahead, Joe.
So I was going to say, the coach said that he stood out. I watched his carries. I saw on somebody on YouTube was able to put all of his carries together, and I wasn't as impressed, to be honest with you, but I did see some analysis saying there just wasn't much room to run. When he did get holes, they were huge, and he did look good running through the holes, but I think anybody could have done that. But they are a much improved offensive line from last year, which I think is going to be an upgrade. And then I think he's going to get the chances, and he's going to get as many of the touches as possible because I just don't think Sean Green is any good. So I think Sankey is going to be one of the top rookie running backs, but I don't think he stood out too much to me in that first game.
That's fair. But like the main takeaway that I get is he's better than Sean Green, and they're going to like him better than Sean Green. Yeah. This hiding the rookies in the depth chart is so stupid. So I'm not buying into any of that at all. So he's going to start to me week 1. And, you said it. He might not have been too impressive, but some of that might have been the line. So I think he's the guy to take in Tennessee for sure.
Yeah, he could be this year's Eddie Lacy. If you think about it,
I think
a guy that's not really going crazy early because people aren't sure what to think about him. And like you both said, Sean Green is, what Sean Green's going to give you, and it's not that much. Finally, we'll go to the Cardinals shutting out the Texans 32-0. Don't expect much of that. Actually, no, you probably could expect much of that if you're on the Texans, if you're a Texans fan. Andre Ellington played every single first-team snap. And this kind of shows you that as this preseason has progressed, they really don't have a guy they like behind him. I don't think anyone's going to challenge him for that starting role at all.
Yeah, you and I early in the year, early in these podcasts, questioned why Ellington was ranked so high and going so high in drafts. But I guess you kind of said it. You can see it because they don't really like anybody else. So Ellington's going to get most of his chances. Yeah. Maybe some goal line touches vultured by Stephon Taylor or Dwyer or somebody, but I think they might even give it to him there. So I could see Andre Ellington having a pretty good year in a weak running back class.
Yeah, I think there's so many running backs right now with the committees and everything out there where you have a guy who's a first and second down guy, and then you have that change of pace back that comes in on the third down.
Yep.
I think I know it's only the first game, but this says a lot to me. Ellington was in on every snap. He's going to be the first, second, and third down back. He can catch out of the backfield. I am high on Ellington. I mean, I'm high on the entire Cardinals offense. You know, I think the entire Cardinals offense has a really good chance to put up numbers, depending on when you get them.
Right.
You know, I'm not going up in the second round and drafting Larry Fitzgerald, but in the right spot, I think Fitzgerald's going to put up numbers this year. I think Floyd, and I do think Ellington could be. I think he could be the guy. One of the guys that really comes up from the back and breaks out and is a top 10 back.
And speaking of Michael Floyd, it came out today that apparently coming out of camp is that he's their number one receiver, and we all know how high I was on Michael Floyd and still am. That's a good sign.
For you, yeah.
Yeah, like I said it before and I'll say it again, I really like Michael Floyd this year. I think he's I would even draft him earlier than he's going right now. I don't know off the top of my head where he's going, but I can quick rock a search on it. He's going 73rd in ESPN drafts, which is about the 8th round if you're in a 10-team league. Yeah, I'm going much earlier than that. I would take him in the 5th or 6th round, easily.
According to Fantasy Football Calculator, they do have him in the 5th round right now.
Okay, I'll take him in the 4th round.
Yeah, I think so. I'd have no problem taking him there. I'm on the same bandwagon as you. I think Floyd's going to be huge this year. If you look at Carson Palmer's numbers in the second half of the year last year, he was up there with Peyton Manning in numbers.
Yeah.
So
their offense is going to be really good this year.
I do. I think anyone you get from that team is going to be better. Now the thing, Larry Fitzgerald is being picked a full round ahead of him. I'd much rather wait around.
Yeah.
And get Floyd because I think Floyd could end up being their top receiver.
Yep.
Yeah, we went over the NFC West, and Floyd ended up having a better year fantasy-wise than Fitzgerald last year anyway, so Fitzgerald might be getting drafted a little bit on name right now ahead of Michael Floyd.
I agree.
Yeah, and flipping over to the Texans side, we had it on here at least earlier that with Andre Brown not even playing, that's what stuck out to us. Well, since then he's been cut, and now he's not. He's been cut, and Jonathan Grimes is their number 2 back. So keep an eye on that because if Grimes is going to be the number 2 back, I don't mind taking a flyer on him because we have said it numerous times. Arian Foster just injury worries all over the place.
If you're the Foster owner, you have to go out and get Grimes.
Yeah,
because you're drafting him in the second round. You need to go out and get Grimes. So you may have to waste a pick and pick him earlier than anyone else, maybe 10th round.
Yeah.
But you need to go out and get him if you're an owner of Foster.
Well, now that we've spent 50 minutes recapping, obviously during the season when we do that, we'll be able to expand a little bit more because that'll be most of our stuff we're talking about. We won't have to talk about our wide receiver ranks or NFC South focus. But let's get into that NFC South focus with the Falcons, the Saints, the Panthers, and the Buccos, the Buccaneers. Let's start out with the Sleeper Spotlight.
Prime time fantasy football's Sleeper Spotlight.
And first off in the Sleeper Spotlight, we'll just run through these really quickly. Josh McCown going in the 14th round in ESPN leagues. He's going to be the starter, I got to think, with Lovie Smith there. He's got a few really nice big targets. He's got a good running back, that can make some plays. Just 14th round, he's a guy he's a bye week quarterback to me, and if you want to take your second quarterback in the 14th or 15th in the last round, go ahead and feel free to take Josh McCown.
For me, McCown's value might hinge a little bit more on Mike Evans than not. I think you were a little bit higher on McCown than I was. We did our quarterback rankings last week, but like you said, 14th round, and you're essentially you might be able to pick him up on waiver wires in some leagues.
Yeah, you
and
probably could.
That's a good thing. Josh McCown's an attractive option for sure.
Not physically, just on paper.
Yeah.
Also, you got Matt Ryan being drafted currently in the 9th round, 87.9 ADP on ESPN. Joe's shaking his head. I'm not sure why.
It's way too late.
Way too late. Okay, I thought you were shaking your head like he's not a sleeper.
No, I think you got Roddy White back, who's healthy. You got Julio Jones back, who's healthy. I don't see any reason why he's not one of the top quarterbacks this year.
It could be the loss of Tony Gonzalez, maybe. I don't know. But I agree. I think he's a guy, and he and Steve and I have said it countless times. These guys are the reason that you can wait on a quarterback
Exactly.
this year. Because if Matt Ryan's going in the 9th round,
Right.
you can draft a couple running backs, a few that you're taking chances on, a couple really good receivers, and end up with Matt Ryan as your
Right.
starting quarterback. I'm okay with that.
Absolutely.
So let's go to running backs. We talked about him a little bit earlier, so we don't need to spend too much time on him, but you know how we like Devonta Freeman to move up to that second on the depth chart. That's what I was looking for. By the time the season starts, which when Steven Jackson gets hurt, he'll be the starter. Currently going in the 14th, 15th round, and I'm sure that probably varies throughout, but I mean, you know, if he's a guy that you can take with your last pick, or even as Steve has said before, on waiver wires, why not?
Yeah, I might even go ahead and get him earlier than that, just because of the Steven Jackson. I'm unsure of Steven Jackson. I'm going to avoid Steven Jackson if I can, but
Yeah.
I might go out and get Devonta Freeman and might have trade bait for the Steven Jackson owner as a handcuff, but I also might go ahead and play him myself if he can produce when Steven Jackson's out, which I think he has the capability of doing.
Yeah, if he can block.
Well, yeah.
Moving on to wide receivers, you got Kelvin Benjamin, a guy I really actually like this year, and definitely as a sleeper. I think you're going to see his ADP creep up a little bit as the preseason goes. Right now on ESPN, it's at 132.2, so you're looking at the 14th round. This is a guy I would take in like the 10th or 11th round. He's a starting guy, already apparently, now I don't know how much you want to read into this, developing a rapport with Cam Newton. I love him this year.
Yeah, I agree. He had in the game one, he had a 29-yard touchdown catch from Derek Anderson.
Right.
I think it was on Monday I read he had a TD from Cam in practice with heavy coverage, guys hanging all over him. The guy's a physical stud, and I agree. I think 14 is late. I think you're only going to see that creep up because I'm expecting he's going to show some of that, you know, physicality in some of these preseason games.
Yeah, just wait till you get to the third preseason game.
That's
when they're
what it is,
all
yeah.
the starters are on there. You're going to see it go way up.
And
So,
who else are they going to throw to?
yeah,
I mean, I think he's big, he's tall, he's physical. I mean, I think he's going to be one of Cam's favorite targets this year.
yeah, he's got to be. Timothy Wright, real quick, talk about, he's going undrafted as a tight end right now, and you might have forgotten about Tim Wright, but he had a pretty decent year last year. In case you're unfamiliar, he's on the Buccaneers. 87.3 points. So, I mean, that's decent. 5.4 per game. But I think you're going to see his role increase a lot this year. Apparently they have him lining up in the slot in some training camp. And if you see a tight end lined up in the slot, you know that they're going to like to look for him, especially with guys like Mike Evans, big guys like Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson taking up some coverage. I think you're going to see some things open up, you know, early in the field in the middle of the field for him. Going undrafted, you know, if you're drafting a backup tight end, and I know not a lot of people do, but if you have Gronk or somebody you're worried about getting hurt, and we've said it before, Timothy Wright's one of those guys where, I mean, you might even be able to put in a waiver claim on him after week 1 or something like that, but I think he's going to have a decent year. I think he goes over those 87 points per game that he had last year. He had 54 catches, which is good for a tight end.
Yeah, I hear that, and I think, obviously not making the comparison, but immediately when you say tight end lining up in the slot, I think Marcus Colston, who was a tight end for 1 year in fantasy football.
Yeah.
And if you had him, you absolutely killed everybody else in the tight end position. So
Sure did.
If he's got the capability of playing a wide receiver role in a tight end position, like you said, as a 1 week filler or something like that, that could be golden if he puts up wide receiver numbers for that week, you know, so.
Yeah.
And then, again, like you said, undrafted, you might be able to just go ahead out and get him and ride him for the bench until you need a tight end.
Well, with you, whoa, got viruses going on my computer apparently. With a guy like Mike Evans being a rookie, don't be surprised if he maybe struggle. Rookie wide receivers tend to struggle a little bit in their first year. So if you see him struggle and you see a guy like Josh McCown, a veteran guy, going to Timothy Wright, don't be surprised. And, I mean, you could see him, you know, if they pull that Marcus Colston thing where he does start lining up in the slot a lot. You know, you could have a pretty much wide receiver 4 or 5 in your tight end spot, which isn't a bad place to be.
Well, one of the things they're doing with Mike Evans right now is they're actually lining him up in the slot in practice. They're actually trying to create mismatches for him because they know he is somebody who's so talented and they want to try to get him the ball. So I think they're probably trying to do the exact same thing with Wright. They're trying to just figure out ways to make plays, get their playmakers the ball, and when you line up guys as big as those guys are, as physical as they are, and as fast as those guys are, you line them up in the slot, chances are they're going to have a mismatch.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it for the sleepers. No, sorry, there's one more. It's not really a sleeper. It's kind of the opposite. Tony Gonzalez is being drafted according to some ADPs. He's retired, guys. Just FYI.
I'm willing to take a flyer.
Go on out of retirement.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so that does it for the sleepers. But let's go to over/under real quick.
It's time for over/under.
All right, starting off with over/under. Let's talk about Drew Brees, 383 points last year. Sorry, Steve, you take us through Drew Brees.
Okay, well, Adam started. He did have 383 points last year. Obviously, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Over 5,000 yards again, because that seems pedestrian for him at this point. 51-62. He had 39 touchdowns and 12 picks. He also had 52 rush yards, and he added 3 rushing touchdowns, which is good for Drew Brees anyway.
Yeah.
He lost fumbles as well. So, we going over or are we going under the 383 last year?
Joe?
I think I'm going to take over. I think the thing that scares me is those 3 rushing TDs. I don't think we can count on those again. But I think that he is going to have a big year. I think Brandon Cooks is going to be his new toy down there, and he still has Jimmy Graham, obviously. Colston is productive every year. So if I'm ever betting on Drew Brees, I'm pretty much always going to take the over.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over as well. By a little bit, not by a whole lot. But, 5,000 yards is a lot of yards. But he has a lot of targets. So, I could see him putting up those numbers again. And, maybe not 3 rushing touchdowns, but maybe 3 rushing touchdowns.
You can see an uptick in their touchdowns.
Yeah.
A couple more.
6, maybe?
Exactly. 45 touchdowns is not out of the realm of possibility for him.
Oh, I was talking rushing touchdowns. 6 rushing touchdowns.
I just meant if you don't get the rushing touchdowns,
Drew
add 4 or
Brees,
5 more passing touchdowns.
Drew Brees is their running back this year, maybe.
That's true.
RBBC.
He's my sleeper.
What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I'm going over as well. I wrote a post we covered our quarterbacks rankings last week. I went a little bit more in depth on my blog last week. And his average over the last 3 years, he's better than 5,000 yards, which is what he did last year again, but he's also averaged 42 touchdowns over the last 3 years, and that's with 39 last year. So, like you said, Joe, 45 is not out of the realm there, so I'm definitely going over on Drew Brees as well. Like you said, he's a top quarterback in this league. The next guy is Matt Ryan. He went up with 275 points last year. 4,500 yards passing with 26 touchdowns and 17 picks. 55 rush yards, no touchdowns, but he did lose 4 fumbles. So are we going over or under on the 275?
Over. Way over. He's probably by almost 100 points over. Getting the weapons back, and just, hopefully an improved offensive line. Their offensive line was really bad last year. He's going to throw more touchdowns and less picks.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add other than over. I think he's way over.
Yep, I would have to agree with that, with Julio Jones being there for a full year and all that. So I agree with all of you. I don't have to say anything else except for Cam Newton is next. 311 points for Cam. He went not as many passing yards, but he's obviously more of a runner. He went for almost 3,400 passing yards with 24 touchdowns, 13 picks. Like I said, he's a runner. He had 580 yards rushing with 6 touchdowns, and he only lost 1 fumble. So over under 311.6.
I have a hard time saying. I'm going to say over because I hate his receiving core down there. Other than Benjamin, I just don't think he has much to throw to. But every year he's counted out and he ends up a top 5 fantasy quarterback. So until he proves me wrong, I'm going to say the over.
Yeah, I'm taking over as well. I think he can get close to that 4,000 yard passing to somebody. And 24 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. I don't think he'll do worse than that. I know they have been saying, his mobility might be an issue this year as far as trying to cut back on it. I don't believe it. But yeah, like you said, he hasn't had, other Steve Smith, who everybody counts out every year. Everyone's like, oh, he doesn't have any targets. He just has Steve Smith. He's really old. And he proves you wrong. He gets a top 5 quarterback. So I don't see why he wouldn't go over.
I agree. Yeah, like you said, the targets, he's never really had any. So you kind of made my point there. So I'm going to go over on Cam Newton as well, and we're pretty well over on the AFC South quarterback core as a whole. So.
Yeah, I'm surprised nobody said under on him. I thought for sure.
I thought about it.
Yeah, we're not going to talk Josh McCown. He played 8 games last year, being a backup and all. Let's move on to wide receivers. Vincent Jackson last year, 164 points, which is about 10 per game. PPR, he added another 78 receptions, which brought him up to 242 points for about 15 per game. 1,224 yards and 7 touchdowns. Joe, what do you think?
I'm going to take the over because of the quarterback. I think he's got a better quarterback, and I think that's going to be able to put him up to at least where he was, but if I had to take something, I'm going over.
Better than Mike Glennon?
Believe it or not, better than Mike Glennon. So, I think, I think having Mike Evans there is actually going to help him. I think lining up in the slot like we talked about earlier, and same with the tight end, I think there's just too much to cover down there. I like the receiving core down there in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I like having Joe on the show because I don't have to say as much then because he makes all my points. So, over. Who's next?
All right.
Over, yeah, okay. Marcus Colston, 15 games last year, 124 points for only 8.29 per game. PPR, he added 75 receptions, which is kind of crazy considering. Bringing his total up to 199 for 13.29 per game, 943 yards and just 5 touchdowns. Joe?
I'm going to go under. I'm going to take the under. I think Brandon Cooks there is going to take some of that away. I just think every year he's a little older. I think he'll put up close to those numbers. So I think where he's being drafted right now isn't a bad spot. But I'm gonna take the under there.
He's 31.
In football terms, that's old.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying, yeah, I didn't realize he was over 30.
Oh, okay. I thought you were making fun of me since I'm close to that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go over. I'm not as high on Brandon Cooks as Joe is, or a lot of people are. A lot of people are in Joe's camp. I'm just not there yet. He's probably good, but I'm going to go over because Brandon Cooks, and I think that's a down year for Marcus Colston, so I like him to bounce back a little bit. Not go much over, but I think he's better than he was last year.
Boy, I am the rubber here. I'm going to go over in a standard,
Yes.
under in a PPR.
Oh,
You're just trying to make both Steve and I happy. That's
No,
all.
actually, I'm going to go over in a standard, maybe. Okay, fine, just slightly over in a PPR. But I don't think you're going to see him get much more than 75 receptions. But I think he's a 1,000-yard guy, and I think he could add a couple touchdowns. I think Brandon Cooks opens things up maybe a little bit for him if he stays healthy. I'm not really extremely high on him because he does worry me a little bit. But I got to think he's better than 124 points. Jericho Cotchery, speaking of those Carolina receivers, 119 points last year for, I think he was on Pittsburgh last year. Yeah, he was on the Jets a few years ago. 7.48 per game. PPR, he added 46 catches, bringing his total up to 165 for about 10 per game. 602 yards and 10 touchdowns. Joe?
Under. There's no way he's getting 10 touchdowns again in Carolina. So I think that's easy. Under.
I'll go under as well. I'm not that high on Jericho Cotchery. Carolina has to go somewhere, but I don't think it's to him, so I'm under.
Give me the over. I think he can get close to 1,000 yards. I definitely think you'll see those touchdowns go down, but we said it before, other than maybe Greg Olsen and now Kelvin Benjamin, I think he's going to be the second or maybe third target for Cam Newton. So I'm going to take the over by a little bit, not by a whole lot. I don't think he's going to be like a 200-point guy. But give me like 130, 140. Let's move on to running backs. Joe, I think that's you.
That is me. I'm sorry. I was looking at you. So, all right. So we have Steven Jackson. He did play 12 games, 115 points in standard, 148 PPR. The reason I bring him up, even though we only had 12 games, I think we were talking a lot about the rookie Freeman there. I think I may be the only one who still has a little bit of faith in Jackson, so I'm going to go over there.
I'm going to go under.
I'm gonna go over on the total, but under on the per game, if that makes sense. I don't, because I think 115 isn't a very high total at all,
Right.
but so he could go over that. But I just think that Devontae Freeman is gonna chunk into his carries and yards and touchdowns and all that stuff. So I'm gonna go under on the per game.
Yeah, I'm going to actually go under in general just because I don't think he's going to be on the field that much this year, and we haven't done this much, but I'm going under because of injury.
Okay. Next.
And I don't wish injury upon anybody.
No, that would be wrong.
Put that out there.
All right, so Jacquizz Rodgers, he did play 15 games last year. Standard, he only had 89.3 points, but PPR, he jumped up to 141. He had 52 receptions and 2 TDs there. He had a total of 4 touchdowns last year. So Adam?
Oh, boy. Quiz. I got to go over. I'm going under. Definitely under on the PPR. I just think you're going to see Devonta Freeman take up his stuff. Steve? No, we lost Steve.
Well, I think Steve and I are in the same camp. We're going to say under on that one. I think that PPR, he'll still have some relevance there. Obviously, I don't know if he'll get up to 52 touchdowns. I think Freeman's just going to take some of that work away from him.
Steve, are you back?
Yeah, I am back.
Okay.
And as long as we're still talking about Jaquiz Rodgers, I will go under just because I think he's had his chances, and Devonta Freeman is going to take the Jaquiz Rodgers role. So I'm going to go under on him, even though the totals were low. I'm just not that high on Jaquiz Rodgers.
Yeah, I agree. Who's next?
All right, so we have Mike Tolbert down in Carolina. He had 96.5 standard, 123.5 PPR. He added 7 touchdowns total, 5 rushing, 2 receiving.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on over there in Carolina with the running backs, but I'm gonna go under. I don't like that situation at all.
I know I don't want any of them on my team.
Yeah, I agree.
So for that reason, I'm saying under, just because I don't want any of them on my team.
Yeah.
Under.
Under.
Do you want to even read the other ones?
No, I think the only one, D'Angelo Williams did play in 15 games. He had 138 in standard points, 164 with 26 receptions in PPR. So I think he is still relevant. I think he's a guy that probably people are looking at as a 4th running back.
They need a running back down there.
They do.
They really do.
I do honestly believe Jonathan Stewart can be good, but the guy is injured all the time.
Yeah.
Heard that.
So D'Angelo, I'm just going to take the under. I just don't like Carolina's offense that much.
Yeah, give me the under because I actually do think Stewart will play some more games, and that means he's going to start over.
He only played 6 games last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all running back by committee, so they're kind of all jumbled and going to end up with the same amount of points, I think.
Yeah, almost the entire division is RBBC.
Yeah.
Pierre Thomas, he had 134 points standard, up to 211 PPR, because like I said earlier, he had 77 receptions and led the league. Adam, what do you think? Over, under?
Boy, this is one of those ones that I think I'm going to go under strictly because I don't know if he can get 77 receptions again. I mean, I know we had talked him up about in a PPR league because he is going to get receptions. I just don't think he'll get that much. I'm going to go
I'm going to go over on this one. I think somebody, even though they really don't have a number one, I think somebody's got to score touchdowns. They can't throw them all. And they only had 4 touchdowns total, just looking at this rushing last year.
I think they can
throw
them all.
At least from these 3 guys.
Did you add in Drew Brees' rushing touchdowns?
Yeah, and Drew Brees had 3.
Right. Yeah.
So I think Pierre Thomas will go over. I think he'll have a little bit more production end zone-wise and maybe even rushing yards-wise as well.
Drew Brees had as many rushing touchdowns as Pierre Thomas and Mark Ingram combined.
Yep.
That's some quick math. Steve, I agree with you. I'm going over with Pierre Thomas. I think his touchdowns have to go up. I think he's still going to be one of the lead leaguers.
Lead leaders?
Let's try that again.
League leaders?
We're going to edit that out. League leaders in receptions. So I'm going to take, because I don't think it's going to take him too much to get to 134 in the standard. So I'm going to take over on both. Mark Ingram, he only played 11 games last year, but I know, Steve, you're pretty high on him. So I don't know if the point total matters as much. He's not much of a reception guy. I think PPR, he pretty much falls way down there. But Steve, maybe you can tell me a little bit more about what you expect from Ingram this year.
Yeah, I think he's the one that has the look of a running back, among the 3 of them at least like a classic type running back that can run the ball on the goal line. Again, the 1 touchdown, I think he has to do better than that. And maybe even better than the 386 yards that he had last year. So I'm going to go over on Mark Ingram as well.
I'll go over because his average was less than 5 per game, and I got to think he gets more than that. I mean, I think he, more than Pierre Thomas, will see an increase in rushing touchdowns.
I think people are saying it every year. They said, this may be the year, this may be the year. So maybe this is the year. I think it can't take much to get him higher.
Now he has Kyrie Robinson breathing down his throat.
That's true.
Kyrie Robinson was on the team last year, but it's apparently taken a huge jump in people's
the only
rankings.
Cause for concern for me, and I didn't watch a lot of Saint games, is he didn't have a single reception in that offense last year.
Kyrie Robinson,
Right, and New Orleans is a passing team. So I can't say to know enough about him. I'll have to look up some of the beat writers. But if he's not going to be someone who can catch the ball, I don't think he's going to be used that much.
Yeah, I guess it's because of Sproles, maybe.
Maybe.
Taking up that spot. Maybe they look to him to fill in a little bit of that Sproles, type of role. I don't know.
I'll take the over because he only had 28 points.
Yeah, I got to go over.
Yeah.
It's hard to say under for that.
Works for me.
Cool. I guess the only other guy who's relevant now because he's a round 2, maybe late round or early round 3 is Doug Martin. I think we probably all agree that I would assume we'd all agree he's going to score more than 57 points this year.
Yeah.
So.
I would hope so, yeah. But just looking back at his 2012 numbers, he did score 270 points that year, 319 in the PPR. He added 49 receptions. The guy was a stud as a rookie. So if we just based it on that number, I think it's pretty safe to say we're all going to say.
I got to go under.
Under, yeah.
Under.
I'll fall squarely in the middle of 2012 and 2013, which is what you can expect. I don't know that I would take him, though, where he's going.
No.
Just to make it relevant. I don't know. I don't think I'd take him that high, just because I'm not sure that I'd trust him. He wasn't that good when he was healthy, and then he went ahead and got hurt, so.
Yeah, I agree with the same reason. The 6 games that he did play, he did not look good at all. So he won't be on any of my fantasy teams this year.
He's going before Murray, Stacy, Bell, Morris, Ball, Bernard. All those guys I'd probably take before Doug Martin.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
According to ESPN, by the way. So.
I have Doug Martin at the beginning of round 3, so I do have him. He's taken right after Alfred Morris is at 23. Arian Foster's at 20, Gio's at 19. So, but that's still early round 3. You're talking. There's still a couple guys out there. I would definitely rather have. I'd rather have Zach Stacy. I'd rather take Andre Ellington.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are guys that I'd rather go after. I'll let somebody else take Martin this year.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, let's move on to tight ends very quickly. We'll skip Tim Wright because we already talked about him. Jimmy Graham, 217 points, PPR 303, 86 receptions, 1,215 yards, and 16 touchdowns.
Don't forget, arbitrator, he's a tight end.
Yeah, we could have talked about him in the receiver category, but tight end category.
I don't know. Over, sure. Superstar.
Why not?
Over. What
Okay.
the hell?
I'm taking under.
He's one of the best.
I just don't see there's any way he repeats 16 touchdowns. I think that all the other numbers are. It is crazy what he put up last year. But I still think he's the number 1 tight end by far. I still think if you have a late round first pick, you're considering taking him as a tight end.
I don't see why not.
And I would as well, but I just don't see him repeating 16 touchdowns. So I'll take the under.
So I'm the split one again. I'm going to go with Steve. I'm going over. Because why not?
That's all right.
All right. Well, Greg Olsen.
We're going to keep track of these, by the way. It's just to.
Yeah, we can. Luckily, it's recorded, and I can go back and listen to them.
That's fun.
Yeah, Greg Olsen, 117 last year. PPR, he added 73 catches for 189, 816 yards, and 6 touchdowns. You going over or under, Joe?
I think I'm gonna take the over. Actually, I think Greg Olsen's going to be a security blanket for and one of the few targets besides Benjamin that we talked about. He's always felt pretty comfortable with Greg Olsen, so I think I'm going to take the over.
I agree with Joe that we talk about how their receiving core struggles. I think Greg Olsen is one of the few constants, if not the only constant that I can think of right now, anyway, that is in that receiving core. So I'm going to take the over for Greg Olsen as well. Familiarity.
Yeah, I was not a huge fan, really, ever of Greg Olsen, but actually this might be the first year I am a fan of him. I like him this year in that offense. All right, well, let's wrap that up, and let's move on to our wide receiver rankings, because we're already way over time, as we kind of figured we would be. We'll just quickly talk about some points on Steve and my wide receiver rankings. We did the top 60. We'll post them on nextlevelradioonline.com, and Steve will post them at stevenrichards.net.
And then I'll just jump in and tell you guys when you're wrong.
Right.
That's
exactly.
a good idea.
Okay, sounds good.
So I guess we'll real quick, what we agreed on, our top 5 is exactly the same. Our top 10 are the same players, just in a different order. And we both say don't worry about starting Reggie Wayne. Steve, I know you had him down at, I gotta find him real quick now, 33.
Yeah, which is in a 3 receiver league, which is right at the fringe starter, but I wouldn't have a problem starting him. But what surprised me is you had come out and said that you have a little bit of concern about him with the ACL and things like that, but you have him at 28, so in a 3 wide receiver league, it seems as though you wouldn't have a problem with that either.
Yeah, he's a fringe guy for me too. I mean, I still think he's going to be targeted a lot, just like T.Y. Hilton, a little bit better than him, a few spots ahead of him. But he's still going to get targets for sure.
I agree. And then just to give some names, the top 5 that we have exactly the same is Calvin Johnson, Demaryius Thomas, AJ Green, Des Bryant, Brandon Marshall, in that order.
I know Joe doesn't agree with that too.
Go ahead, Joe.
No, not necessarily. I don't agree.
Joe said he hated that.
I did not. Yeah, well, hated is a strong word. I despised, maybe.
Okay.
No, I think that I like that ranking, but there's something about that offense in Chicago. Maybe it's just because I got to see them play when they played the Eagles. I have Brandon Marshall actually at the 3rd wide receiver. I'm not afraid of Alshon Jeffrey taking too many of his balls away. I think he had enough. I mean, he was a great receiver last year, and I still think he had almost 100. I think he had close to 90 catches last year. No, Brandon Marshall.
He had over 100.
Brandon Marshall had 100 catches.
He had 100. Yeah, so I think he can still get over 100 catches, and I have him as my number 3 because the way I look at it is I think Dez can be a hothead. I think he can get himself out of the game. I just not a real big fan of AJ. AJ's quarterback Dalton, and I think Jay Cutler is in for a huge year. I think he's someone you can draft late and get big things. So that's why I put him up there. I think that Marshall is a safer pick, in my opinion, than AJ Green and Des Bryant.
All right, well let's go on to what we disagree about. Deshaun Jackson is not in Steve's top 20. He just cracked into my top 20, I believe. I don't know my own rankings. Yeah, he's number 18 on my list. Kelvin Benjamin is a borderline starter for me, not for Steve. Steve, where did you have him? Do you know? There you go.
I have him pretty low,
43,
actually, now that we've been talking about how good he is with this NFC South spotlight.
43, I had him at 32, so I'm obviously a little bit higher.
I side more with Steve on that.
Okay.
I like him, I just don't like him enough to put him up that high.
Okay. And that could obviously change as the preseason goes either way. I could drop him, they can move him up. We only agree on 2 players between 50 and 60, and that's Tavon Austin and Kenny Stills. We don't have to worry about drafting the same guy outside the top 10.
We're kind of jumbled in our, going over, trying to find things that we disagree on. It was tough to find just one thing or 2 things that we disagreed on. So we're kind of jumbled, which I guess, I don't know, maybe speaks to the variety that's possible in the wide receiver class, and you might be able to find the guy that you like because somebody else probably doesn't like him. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, where do you have? I know I have Floyd pretty high. Like I've said before, I'm pretty high on him. Steve actually has him a little bit higher, which I'm a little surprised.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
At 16, I have him at 19, but we both have him as a top 20 guy, which puts him securely in a wide receiver 2 position. Joe, would you agree?
Yeah, I do. I actually have him currently at 17 on my rankings, but I'm going to be moving him up a lot more because of the recent article that came out today that you mentioned about him being above. Right now, I have Larry Fitzgerald above him.
You might switch that,
and I may switch them. I still think Larry Fitzgerald's going to be productive. I had him just outside my top 12. I think I'm a little higher on Fitzgerald than you guys were, but I'm also a big Michael Floyd fan.
Yeah.
Okay. Along those same, I have Marshall 5, Alshon Jeffrey 6, and Fitzgerald 15, Michael Floyd 16. So those are a couple wide receiver combinations where, at least according to me, you can't go wrong with either guy on the outside, I wouldn't think.
I agree.
Yeah, so, all right, well, like I said, we'll post the full rankings at nextlevelradioonline.com. Just go to Adam's blog, which is me, and then you can also go to Steve's blog, which you can find that on nextlevelradioonline.com. It'll link you right to it, or you can just go straight to stevenrichards.net. And I guess you'll probably do a little write-up again this week, Steve?
Yeah, but it'll probably be shorter because I'm doing 60 guys instead of 25, so that could get a little bit lengthy, but there'll be a little bit extra to it.
Yeah. All right, well, let's real quick go over, Joe was nice enough to rank the rookie wide receivers this year. Finally was able to say that correctly. There's a ton of them. A ton of them, so that's why we decided to rank them. So who do you have as your best rookie or your highest rookie?
Right now, just because I think of the chances he's going to get, I have Brandon Cooks as the number 1 rookie wide receiver. I don't think he's necessarily the most talented. I just think in that offense, he's going to get the most looks. He has been, if you look at all the beat writers from New Orleans, that's all they've been talking about is how good he's looked. And then in game 1, he had 5 receptions for 55 yards and a touchdown. The issue I'm having with him right now is that his ADP is just climbing. Yeah. It is going up high, and right now I think it's in the 7th round, and I just don't know if I'm willing to take a 7th round wide receiver on a rookie just yet.
Yeah, I agree.
But I do think he has the ability to be the best. So I have Brandon Cooks listed number 1. I'd probably go Mike Evans number 2. I like his quarterback down there. I like with Vincent Jackson on the outside, and I heard about them lining him up in the slot to try to create mismatches. So I think they're going to try to get him the ball. Number 3 is probably the guy who's got the most talent out of all of the rookies, Sammy Watkins. I think in game 2 he had 3 receptions for 21 yards. If you are if you've watched him on YouTube, he's had 2 crazy, spectacular one-handed catches in camp. The guy can catch. I think his downfall, his quarterback, EJ Manuel. I'm not big on him, and I think if he were the guy who was in New Orleans or if he was in Tampa Bay, I think he'd easily be my number 1 rookie wide receiver. After that, I have Jordan Matthews out of Philly. I'm not worried about his first game just yet with his 3 drops. I think that Chip's going to find a way to get him the ball. After that, I'd put Kelvin Benjamin. I do think he's probably more talented than Jordan Matthews. I just don't know if Carolina's offense is going to be as dynamic. So that's why I have him below. And then a couple other guys I have had trouble ranking just yet. Odell Beckham Jr., I think he's pretty darn talented, but it's the Giants' offense is pretty bad. They're learning a new system under Ben McAdoo, so as we saw with Eli Manning, can't throw it more than 10 yards right now.
And he's having some injury problems.
And he's having injury problems. Yeah, he's been injured with the hamstring, and right now he has been back to practice as of this week, but he's 50-50 for this week's game. He could easily end up being one of the top rookie wide receivers, but right now I would not put him up there. Allen Robinson out of Jacksonville, hamstring injury, he hasn't done much. Marquise Lee I have pretty low just because of the fact he got called out by Gus Bradley and the fact that he's in Jacksonville. I don't know if there's many wide receivers, especially a rookie wide receiver, that can come in and actually perform well there. I hope he proves me wrong. He's a pretty talented guy. And another guy that's probably not on many people's radars, but Devontae Adams out of Green Bay. He's right now, they're saying that he's challenging Boykin for the number 3 spot because Boykin's been struggling with drops in camp. That was reported last week. Earlier in the week, this week, I've been hearing that Boykin is looking really good. And Devontae Freeman, unfortunately, he fumbled 2 special teams plays.
You mean Devontae Adams?
Devontae Adams, I'm sorry. Devontae Adams fumbled 2 special teams plays, so that hurt him a little bit. But that's a guy I don't think anybody's drafting right now unless you're in a super deep
doubt
league.
it, yeah.
But that's someone to keep an eye on if there's an injury to Boykin or any Nelson or Cobb. He's going to be the next guy to step in. And like I said, they are raving about him in camp.
Well, the past 2 years, one of their starters has gotten hurt at least the past couple of years.
Aaron Rodgers, that offense, even if Nelson goes down, I do think that there's a reason they drafted Devontae Adams. They drafted him, I think, 2nd round. Maybe they drafted him pretty early. I should know that off the top of my head. But they drafted him pretty early, so they do want him to contribute. And I think he'll make some plays this year. But I think that's just some guy to keep on your radar in case any injuries happen. And like I said, Boykin's been struggling with drops, so it's not out of the question for him in the next couple of games to really put himself in there for the talk as a 3rd receiver.
Yeah, I don't think they're attached to Boykin as a 3rd receiver. I mean, I think he'll end up getting the starting job, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see Adams move into some of those wide receiver sets, and they took him in the 2nd round.
They took him, that's what I thought. And, the other thing is, at the beginning of the year, they came in, Nelson and Cobb were both looking to get new deals.
Right.
They gave Nelson a deal. Cobb is not getting a new deal as of yet. They may be saying at the end of the year, we'll let Cobb walk, and we'll put Adams right in there. So that's why,
dynasty leagues.
Exactly.
Or,
that's why I think you want to keep an eye on him, because I do really think I think he could be somebody that, if he's not on your team this year, and maybe he's not drafted this year, dynasty keeper leagues, he's someone to think about going forward.
All right. Well, real quick, Steve, are there any of those that maybe you'd agree with wholeheartedly, or disagree with, I should say?
I'm excited that Sammy Watkins wasn't first. Maybe that means that the hype train is slowing down a little bit.
I may be one of the only ones, Steve. I think I'm the only one not on the hype train.
Yeah, I'm not excited about Sammy Watkins, but I could see it. I mean, like you said, there's a ton of them that could have fantasy relevance, which is really an anomaly as far as the wide receiver position goes. But a bunch of these guys,
you could see them all flop too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think the surrounding kind of theme here is that you can take one of these guys late, and you could end up with a really talented receiver, especially if you're in a dynasty league or something like that. Somebody way down the line, you never know who the next Alshon Jeffrey is. So it could be any one of these guys. Really,
he may not even be on this list.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, who was drafting Keenan Allen last year? There are probably not a lot of people.
No, I picked him up.
You picked him up. That's my point. You didn't
what
draft
I mean,
him.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I picked up Alshon Jeffrey last year.
Right.
Yeah, that's what that goes to show. I think he was actually drafted in one of our leagues like really late. All right, well, I guess that wraps it up for today's a little bit extended of a show. Like we said, we had a lot to go over with the preseason games and then the NFC South and wide receiver rankings. Next week, we'll have running back rankings. We won't have quite as much as 60. It'll probably be, 30, 40, something like that, usually. We'll talk about the NFC East finally wrapping up all the divisional over-unders and sleeper spotlights, which will free up a lot of time for us, so we're actually kind of excited for that. I believe we're going to have a special guest on next week from the NFC East division, so keep an eye out for that. And then we'll probably wrap up a couple of these second week preseason games. I think the main reason we did every single game this week is because it was the first week. Next week, I assume we'll probably just kind of highlight a few of them to save some time and not spend 50 minutes on it. But Joe, thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
You're going to be coming on semi-often, correct?
I think at this point I can come on as often as you guys want. So if I talk too much and you don't want me back, tell me. But
we'll see you mid-season.
Sounds good.
All right, well, I guess that wraps it up for this week. Check Steve out at srichards31 on Twitter. You can check me out at Adam and I don't know my own Twitter at Adam Next Level. And then Joe is at Joey Webb.
At Joey Webb 32.
32. I'm the only one that doesn't have numbers in my thing.
You got to get the numbers.
Freaking confusing.
Yeah.
And then you can tweet questions to the show at NXT Level Radio, hashtag PTFF, or email primetime@nextlevelradioonline.com. You can also send in your name and email if you want to join our fantasy football league, like I had mentioned earlier. Joe, I know you do a little bit of writing on the side as well that you wanted to talk about quickly.
Yeah, I'm the Green Bay Packers correspondent for FantasyPros.com. There's a couple of us that do that. I know I'm an Eagles fan. I tried to be an Eagles correspondent, but it was already filled up. So if you see me out there tweeting out Packers news, it's because I follow all of their beat writers, and that's kind of why I know a little bit more about Devontae Adams than probably either of you guys did, because I'm following the beat writers, and so I post updates as often as possible about Green Bay. So you can see some of if you're interested in Lacey news, Rodgers news, I'll be putting it out there.
All right, and Steve, you got anything coming up other than StevenRichards.net?
No, that should be about it. Just keep following the blog and following the Twitter, and I'm always talking about something, so feel free to chime in on Twitter especially.
All right, cool. Make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes. Just search for Primetime Fantasy Football. We're the first one that pops up. And as always, we're presented by Next Level Radio. Subscribe to that as well. Just search for Next Level Radio on iTunes. That'll pop up. And then you can also go to nextlevelradioonline.com. There you will find, if you don't have iTunes, you can stream previous podcasts of both Primetime Fantasy Football and the Showcast, which is every Sunday from 6 to 8. As well as any guest interviews we have had, and I know we have had a bunch, and I know we're in the works of getting a bunch more. I think we might even be talking to Colin Mockery from Whose Line Is It Anyway pretty soon, so keep an eye out for that. Follow us on Twitter at NXT Level Radio, like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Next Level Radio Online. I think that does it for all the little plugs I had to do. So we will see you next week when we talk NFC East, talk a little bit more about some of the preseason happenings, and rank our running backs. So, Joe, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Steve, thanks again for putting up with us.
Yeah, I mean, it's forced, but it's fun sometimes. So.
All right, well, we will see you next week. Have a good one.
Things change for the better and for the worse. So I called my mama and she said, baby,
The Showcast.
Let's talk about these promposals. This is a Chick-fil-A one. This is, the cardboard box of chicken nuggets. Under the lid, I'd be one lucky tater tot if you'd go to prom with me. Okay,
they don't even serve tater tots.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It's definitely a Chick-fil-A box. Makes no sense. I
don't want to go to the prom with you just because you're stupid.
Sundays on Next Level Radio.